Okay, we've got all our four distinguished candidates lined up at the table. They're sitting in no particular order. They'll be invited to respond differently each time we have a question. 60 questions have been put forward. Impossible to deal with all of those. So what we've done we've sat down, we've given every question a 1, 2 or a 3, and those have put in multiple questions. We'll tell you which one we'd like to hear from you. The plan is that the question comes from those who have put the questions through, and then each candidate will have up to 2 minutes to respond to the question, but to make sure that everybody goes away feeling content or satisfied or dissatisfied, the person who asked the question will invite them just to respond to the answers, but they won't get then a chance to hear again from the candidates on that question, and we'll move on to another question. We've picked a lot of topics that are local and national, so there's a nice mix of things, and hopefully we'll get some illumination, ladies and gentlemen of our distinguished panel. Right, so question number 1, we picked is from Clive Petrie.
Are they going to do opening statements?
Are they going to do openings? Oh, good idea. Yeah, I was so keen to get on with it because you just told me we were finishing at 9 o'clock and not 9:30, and I wanted to get through the questions. Okay, let's do the questions. Let's do the opening statements. Let's start from the left, Edmund.
Okay, thank you very much. So, a bit about myself. I was born in Derbyshire, but actually brought up for most of my childhood in East Africa. I graduated in physics. I've been a research scientist and engineer in the energy industries ever since. I've worked in nuclear energy, wind energy, and oil and gas. I do live locally in Fordham. My wife teaches in a local village college. Our children attend local schools, and I've worked in Cambridge for most of my career. I got involved in politics because our democracy is in danger. We were clearly promised in 2016 that Brexit or not was our decision and that our decision would be implemented. It hasn't been. Repudiate the democratic principle and you put at risk the foundations of a peaceful and civilised society. My stand provides an option for upholding our democracy. Repudiate Brexit or pervert it, we may not get a democratic choice on other vital things ever again. It will be said we now know more about Brexit. Well, we certainly know more about the EU with Barnier's mission to make the terms so brutal for the British that they regret ever voting to leave, or Verhofstadt's office gloating we finally turned them into a colony. We know we're exposed to up to €500 billion in a Eurozone crisis. We can't stop the onward march of the EU army. We know nothing except a clean break will recover our fishing rights. But nothing whatever has changed with the anti-democratic nature of the European Union. There is the party that now says it wants to get Brexit done, but doesn't seem to have a policy for doing so. For 3.5 years, it repudiated its own manifesto. It lacks the political will to deliver. The only way to fulfil the people's decision is to leave on clean break terms. A free trade agreement is far more likely if we insist on otherwise walking away. But that needs enough people like me being elected to Parliament. Taking no deal off the table really was bonkers. Locally, I'm taking a stand against the Seneca solar farm, which would industrialise 3,500 acres of currently green farmland, plating over England with solar panels and giant battery packs. Enough land to build a whole new town, but producing a paltry amount of energy, all of it unreliable. I have committed to hold regular policy forums across the constituency on any subject where constituents can shape the stand I should take, and I have promised 2 such already. This will, I hope, bring some genuinely participative democracy back into our politics. But the main issue, I feel, remains the survival of our democracy. The legendary Tony Benn gave a very powerful speech in 1991 on the Maastricht Treaty, ending by saying that his was not a nationalistic argument, nor is it, as Benn saw it, about sovereignty. It is a democratic argument, and it should be decisive in a democratic chamber. Likewise, mine is not a nationalistic position, nor is it an economic one, though the recovery of our fishing industry alone would be transformative in East Anglia. It is a democratic argument, and it should be decisive in any democratic society.
About 2 minutes. Lucy. Please.
When I stood to be your MP over 4 years ago, I promised and committed to campaign on 3 issues. The first was better school funding, the second was infrastructure, and the third was better connectivity through broadband. And I have delivered on all of those 3. Firstly, in relation to school funding, we all know that Cambridgeshire schools have been historically underfunded. And I've worked with parents, with head teachers, and with other MPs who also represent areas that have been underfunded to ensure that we level up our funding in these areas. I've taken our local head teachers 4 times to Westminster to meet the 4 different Secretaries of State so that they get their voice heard, so the Secretaries of State understand what that means for our area here. And we've had some success. So 2 years ago, we managed to change the national funding formula, which meant that we levelled up funding for our area. South East Cambridgeshire got 3.1 million more. In addition, I managed to lobby to ensure, with those head teachers' help, to get East Cambridgeshire identified as an opportunity area. And I know we're not in East Cambridgeshire, but it's really important because that was a fund for social mobility. There are only 12 opportunity areas in the country out of a potential 300, and we in East Cambridgeshire were one of them. Now, I appreciate there is still more to do, and we still need more funds for our schools. We have committed to £14 billion more for our schools nationally, and that will help ensure that we level up here our funding. Secondly, on infrastructure, I've helped get funding for roads and stations in our area. I helped get the Ely bypass delivered, and construction is starting on a station in Soham next year. And since I was elected, I've raised the need to upgrade the A10. I've raised it with various Chancellors of the Exchequer, I've raised it with various Secretaries of State for transport, and I have supported a bid which has recently been put in for the funding which is necessary to upgrade the A10. I will continue to upgrade for that, which is one of my main infrastructure campaigns. And finally, on connectivity, working with Connecting Cambridgeshire, having many meetings with BT and local residents, we now have 97% of our premises across Cambridgeshire connected to superfast broadband. And when local issues have arisen, I've supported our local communities. One here that's affected you in Waterbeach is the incinerator. When that application was put in last year, I opposed it. Again, when the appeal was made, both in writing and at the inquiry. I would really value the opportunity to continue representing our area, getting our voice heard, both locally and in Westminster.
And James, we'll start with you because we're going to do it a different way.
Good evening, everybody. I'm James Bull, the Labour candidate. Thank you for inviting me here to speak with you tonight. I grew up here in South East Cambridgeshire. I attended the local schools and I live right here in Waterbeach with my wife and daughter. I spent 14 years working in local government in social housing, and for the last 2 years I've worked for Unison, the Public Services Trade Union. As a resident and a parent of our community, I've experienced firsthand what a decade of Tory austerity has done to our community. Our Fenland roads are crumbling, people can't get an appointment for weeks at our GP surgeries, our local schools are on track for a funding shortfall of over £150 per pupil. But Labour have a plan to repair our community. We'll build homes people can actually afford. We'll reverse the cuts inflicted on our public services. We'll save our NHS from collapse and we'll renationalise our buses and trains. And we will fix our rigged, upside-down economy so that it works for everyone, not just those at the very top. We will deliver real change and lift us out of this mess. We'll start with the people's vote on Brexit, a £26 billion a year NHS rescue plan, free personal care for over 65s, free childcare for under 5s, and the scrapping of tuition fees. We'll even tackle the biggest crisis of our time and aim to make the UK zero carbon by 2030. Tonight you will hear promises to repair our broken public services from all candidates, but Labour are the only party who are being honest with you. Honest about how we'll pay for it, because it is only Labour who are willing to go after the billionaires, the tax dodgers, the multinational corporations and the financial elites who've taken advantage of our rigged economy for far too long. It's time for real change, time for an economy and a society we can all be proud of and that we can all feel safe and secure in, and that works for us, the many, not the few.
Thank you. And Pippa. Thank you.
I'm Pippa Halings, and I'm the Liberal Democrat parliamentary candidate for South East Cambridgeshire. I'm going to tell you about my values and why it's critical to vote for Liberal Democrats in this constituency, in this election. Why I'm standing here before you, which wasn't in my life plan, stems from my Liberal values and how they've shaped my life. My belief in a free, fair and open society that values diversity, community, internationalism, environmentalism and equality. I grew up in Yorkshire in one of the left behind cities, and then I spent over 25 years living and working in East Africa, the Caribbean and South America, working on issues of environment and poverty alleviation. My family and I moved here in 2012 to Histon and Impington, where I set up my own business, through which I now work with the United Nations, bringing together decision makers to apply world-class research to public policy. You see, unlike Mr. Gove, I like my evidence and I love experts. This election is an emergency. This election is about the climate emergency. It's an election about the NHS and our schools and the terrible underfunding that they are facing. It's also about the values I mentioned and the fact that they are under the greatest threat ever. And that's why this election is also about Brexit. The Brexiteers want climate and environmental deregulation. Brexit will leave people poorer and nations divided, and it will decimate the NHS workforce and leave it exposed to trade deals with Trump and the US. Every vote in this election and in this seat will count. The Liberal Democrats, from the beginning, have put the case for a second referendum. Labour now includes it in its manifesto, and that is fantastic, but its leader will not campaign for Remain. Every single Liberal Democrat MP and their leader will campaign for Remain in the second referendum. If elected, I will stand up for the values that we all share.
Thank you, Pippa. That's